Hello, good morning, and welcome to our webinar today, Social Media Isolation, Influencer Marketing in the Time of Coronavirus. You can join the conversation with us. You can tweet us on Twitter at Vuelio or use the hashtag Social Media Isolation. Of course, we're on LinkedIn, or you can email in and join the chat in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, where there is a live chat function where you can type questions. There will be discussion and Q&A at the end that you can join in. I am your host today. My name is Jake. I'm Head of Marketing at Vuelio. And if you want to send anything to me on Twitter, you can at MediaJake. But I'm delighted to say that we are joined by 4 fantastic guest speakers. So I'd like to welcome Ciara, Elle, Rosie, and Sarah to today's webinar. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So Ciara and Elle are on the influencer side of things. Ciara runs the super popular My Fussy Eater food blog and channels. And Elle is, of course, from Keep It simpElle, the amazing fitness, and also this extends into real life as well as, I guess at the moment, virtual fitness activities. And Rosie and Sarah, we're delighted to welcome from PDC Brands. So we're covering a lot of topics today across different areas of influencer marketing. This is our agenda. We will be setting the scene based on some information and statistics from Vuelio's most recent influencer survey, which we published just a few weeks ago now. The results of this survey were collected just before lockdown began, so it really gives us a sense of what normal looks like in influencer marketing, and then we'll be opening up the discussion to see how the current situation has affected influencer marketing on both sides of the relationship. So, without further ado, here are some key graphs that we found, which is showing that there are more professional influencers now than there have ever been before, and 19% state it as their current main source of income, which has risen from 8% when we first started the survey back in 2016. And we're also seeing a decline of personal reasons for being an influencer or becoming an influencer, suggesting that the industry is finding its feet and definitely solidifying more professional practices. This graph here is showing in the collaborations between influencers and brands what the most popular activities are. We're still seeing a huge number of sponsored blog posts as one of the main activities, whereas on the other side we've got things like discounts and influencer takeover and affiliate marketing perhaps not having as much traction for either the brands or the influencers taking part. This is an important graph, and we'll probably come back to this in the discussion, because this is factors that influencers are considering when accepting brand sponsorship or not accepting brand sponsorship. So 75% of rejected PR pitches, brand pitches, are because of a lack of relevance to their audience. And then also on the negotiating compensation side of things, you can see potential interest of audience in the brand is another key factor. So it's really this relevance angle that brands, PRs, comms, marketing have known for years, and it's so important to keep the target markets right and make sure you're working with the right people. Just going to skip on to views on commercialization of influencer channels. Really good to see that such a high number believes that sponsorship disclosure is critical for every collaboration, though obviously as this is a requirement, it would be brilliant to see that at 100%. And also seeing that more influencers believe they should be compensated for any coverage they give to brands. That is a 68% agreeing with that, which has risen year on year since we first began the survey. And our penultimate slide I'm going to show you is influencers' opinions on working with PRs. And there's always been this imbalance felt by the influencer community where they believe that journalists, perhaps in traditional media, are receiving favorable or more attention than influencers, despite the fact that influencers obviously have an engaged audience, are very good at their professional jobs, and they're very good at knowing what they're doing. And we can see that in the results on this graph. And then the final one is just to look at the future of the industry. And obviously, again, this was pre-lockdown, and we're seeing that We're expecting more adverts to be published on blogs. We're expecting more auditing. We're expecting more blogs and influencers posts will be driven by advertisers' needs. All these indicators suggest more professionalization of an industry, which is still in its infancy, it's still finding its feet, and it's still yet to fully be defined. So, with that, I'm going to direct some questions to our influencers and to our brands here today. So I'm going to start, Elle, if I can start with you, and just ask how lockdown initially impacted what your content was doing, and then how it's changed as we've gone through lockdown.
I think the main change for me since lockdown was having to really identify my different streams of revenue and my different ways of creating content, and figuring out what would still be relevant and what would still be well received by my audiences. I think I had a couple of collaborations that were due to start at exactly the same time as lockdown, and I think maybe I was actually ahead of the game, because I went back to the PRs and I was like, are you sure that this is going to happen? And they said, yes, I'm absolutely sure it is. I went out and bought all the product, and then they were like, nope, it's not happening. You know, when you just have one of your head in hands moments. So I have had to change my content. I'm now delivering online classes. I'm really even more so picky about what sponsored content I put on my Instagram, because I understand that a lot of people are going through very hard circumstances based on the fact that there is a pandemic, based on the fact that people's employment statuses has changed. But I'll say, on the affiliate side of things, which is something I never worked very hard at, that's actually proving to be more successful than it has been in the past. So it's really weird to see how different forms of content are doing so differently now in the pandemic than it was before.
And have you all seen your audiences increase, go up, and engagement go up?
So I have, and that's not directly related to the pandemic. It's actually more related to all of the crises that have been going on in America with George Floyd and diversity. So through that, I have seen an increase in my audience side and in engagement, which is great to see, because PR and influencers, we all have work to do ourselves to increase and improve in diversity and inclusion, not just race, but for sizes, genders, etc. So yeah, that's been a change for me.
And is that something that you're particularly aware of when you're writing your content? Because obviously you write a lot about fitness and exercise, but do you feel able to take yourself out of that niche, I guess, and talk more broadly on different topics and issues, and the George Floyd killing in America, and be able to talk to these with your same audience?
100% I do. I think it's something that I've always had an angle of diversity in my content, because at the end of the day, I guess, as a Black woman, I will always have that as another stepping stone to get to where I need to get to. And that's no different in the fitness industry. So diversity in the fitness industry, whether it's size, age, gender, race, and then as a professional, the professional side of that is exactly the same. So it's been a conversation that's come up regularly on my channels based on who gets invited to influencer events, based on brands who they choose to showcase their products and their content. So I absolutely feel comfortable talking about it, and I feel even more blessed that I have a slightly bigger audience to hear what I have to say right now.
Yeah, and I guess then it comes back to that authenticity that is so important to all the content you create.
100%, which then makes it a bit, not more difficult, but I was always authentic in what brands I chose to work with, but it's even more important now that as I want to keep the trust and authenticity, my authenticity and trust between myself and my audience.
Perfect. And so while on the commercial side of things, you've seen different ways to engage with brands. Ciara, I'm just wondering from the food perspective, because I guess the way you work with brands is normally quite similar, I'm guessing. So I'm just wondering how that changed for lockdown.
Well, I'll be honest, the first few weeks were crazy. It was so busy because, food was the one thing that people could spend their money on. So I think a lot of brands that had budget quite quickly moved with that budget to get, some, whatever it is, like recipe content or just general kind of marketing or advertising out there. So I found the first few weeks actually really, really busy. It's definitely kind of quietened a bit. And I think maybe it's because the length of time this is going on. I think we all probably thought at the beginning this was only going to last a few weeks. So I think maybe now everyone's getting a bit more cautious with budgets and more long-term thinking. So definitely the approaches from brands and from PRs has quietened down. But one interesting thing that I have noticed, and I have been doing for a brand as well, is creating content that's completely different from the content that they would usually put on their socials. So I'm working for I shouldn't really mention names today, but a big British clothing home store, and they would never have had food content on, say their Instagram. They would have shown kitchenware and appliances, but not necessarily actual food content, recipe content. Yeah. But I am working kind of on a more long-term project with them, producing that content, and they've completely changed the way they are approaching their socials in that respect. So, I'm doing food content, they have someone doing fitness, they have someone else talking kind of about mental health and, taking care of your mind in lockdown. So they have completely pivoted, which I've found really, really interesting. So rather than just, pushing out their products and, buy this, they've really changed their content so that it's actually really helpful and really useful for their audience.
So they've moved to a topic and a sector that you cover naturally and has actually become a hot issue during lockdown that requires more attention anyway.
Yeah, and I think in general, just providing more value, for their audience that are there already, rather than just a case of, if you're sat at home, buy, okay, buy this product, but also, maybe tomorrow, here's a recipe you might find interesting, or, here's a fitness class, 15-minute Pilates that you might like. So it's more, they're really broadening their content, which I've found really interesting, and I think it's definitely the way forward for brands to kind of speak to their audience, across all their interests, rather than just, you like to go shopping once a month. It's really kind of trying to tap in what they do and how they feel and what they enjoy doing every single day. And as I said, I'm working with a brand on that kind of project, but I'm seeing a lot of other brands adopt that approach as well. So yeah, that would be really interesting to see long term if that continues, that if it's not just because we're all at home, a lockdown situation, if that kind of content continues post-corona.
Do you think I don't want you to speak to the brand particularly that you're working with, but do you think this kind of move to encompass more topics and areas, do you think they're new to influencer marketing, or do they have established influencer marketing practices and now they're just bringing in more subjects because it is appropriate for their target market?
Yeah, no, they have very established influencer marketing. They've been doing for quite a long time and quite effectively. But it was the more traditional, either sending out gifted products or doing paid campaigns with their actual products that they sell. So they just seem to have stepped it up a notch now with kind of other content.
Excellent. So that brings us quite nicely onto Rosie and Sarah. Can you explain a little bit about how you would normally go about influencer marketing, and then the impact of lockdown, if there has been an impact at all, on the way that you now practice?
Yeah, so I would say that the way we approach influencers has remained fairly much the same, but from the start of lockdown, we are focusing more on a content change, I guess similar to what Ciara's just explained, but from the brand side. So we've been focusing more on content that is helpful and useful to our audience. And I guess it's also allowed us to become a little bit more creative in the content that we use and a bit more experimental. So we've been looking at content that our audience will find useful, and it's more of an activity base, for example. So for Dr. Teal's, we've worked on more exercise and relaxation approach, but using similar influences that sort of adhere to our brand pillars. I don't know, Rosie, if you agree.
Yeah, I think as well, like, we just, you know, when we started this, we've got certain products within our ranges which, you know, are so much more, like, there's different priorities, I think. Like, people have such different priorities. So I think we've just wanted to try and be really relevant. We've just wanted to make sure that, you know, as soon as we sort of went into lockdown, like, you know, we did look at our strategies and we thought we actually need to make changes for now to make sure that what we're saying is relevant to the audience. And I think that's one of the reasons we've definitely been working with influencers, because I think influencers have such a trusted channel, and I think it's been like such a good way for us to connect our brands with audiences and try and have a conversation which is relevant. I think, like, as Sarah said, like, some of the things that we've been doing with, like, the channel is to make sure that things are just, it's right for that time.
Mm-hmm. And do you,
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that when, you know, using the influencers who have an engaged audience and a trusted audience, when you're creating campaigns together and you're creating, you know, ideas for collaborations, do you give a lot of the creative over to the influencers and like trust in them because, you know, they know what works for their channels, or do you like to have a say in how it's how things work, how things are perceived, viewed, spoken about, etc.?
So we really focus on building a relationship with the influencer, because of course it has to be an authentic relationship on both ends as well. So when it comes to working with influencers, we hand over a lot of the creativity to them because we want it to be coming from their voice, of course. So we make sure that they're comfortable. I mean, there are obviously maybe some like small directions that we might give, but yeah, we're really obviously keen on having a great relationship with the influencer. And if we work with influencers that we know their audience and themselves would use or like our brand. So yes, we do give quite a bit of the creative brain over to them, and we also work with them. We want to work with them on a long-term basis. So we will like sit down with them and ask them, you know, for their ideas and how they might see their content panning out, you know, across several months or however long that they want to work with us, and vice versa.
And so do you look for those long-term... Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to like sort of follow on with what Sarah was saying. Like, I think for us, like, it is very much like, you know, we're in a really fortunate position that the brands that we get to work with do have, there is a lot of love there from influencers already. And I think, like, in the past, like, any campaigns that we've sort of done, which the ones that work the best is definitely when someone already has a love for that product. And I think that's, again, that's one of the reasons the influencer marketing that we've done works really well, is because they're already talking sometimes about the products that we already have, and they're already talking about that to their audience. So it just makes more sense when we do that campaign, because they already know sort of what to say about the brand. But yeah, as Sarah said, it's just sort of tweaking it to make sure that the correct information is put over.
And so it's that authenticity that Elle was talking to, is you know, remaining true to the kind of content you're doing. That works to then collaborate with them, because they're the ones that know their audience, and they're the ones that know your product. So they're the ones that are going to give your product the best perspective, I guess, for their audience.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Look, we've had a question come in. It's aimed at influencers, but actually, Rosie and Sarah, I'm going to ask you first. So what are the main measurements of success? So how do you measure the success of your campaigns? You don't have to talk to any like specifics, but like what metrics are you using for your influencer marketing?
So we use sort of the normal measurements that I guess most people do, such as like, the impressions and the engagement, and I guess also as well the return on investment. But I guess another way that we do measure success is that long-term relationship as well, because we do really value those long-term relationships with the influencers, because not they're working with us as a brand, but also you can learn a lot from them as a brand, from how they use the product to like the feedback that they give as well. So that as well is part of a measurement for us when we work with influencers.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's just, I think like we will, if something's been like posted, say on like Instagram by an influencer, and it's like a campaign that we've been working on with them, I think we can see like from the comments, like if it sits well on that page and the feedback is like positive and stuff like that, I think you can see it so clearly when something is being promoted by someone that they don't really have that love for. So I think just for us it is very much just like, it's when you see something that kind of like is sitting well and the comments are really positive, I think that's always like a really good sign for us as well that we've kind of done good work there.
Excellent. And you've talked to the long-term relationships you like to build with influencers, and Elle, I know for many influencers, this is an important part of the work you do, because one-off campaigns can be like a drop in the water. Do you look, Anel, if I start with you, do you look to work with brands and campaigns on a long-term basis rather than just like individual like one-off posts?
Yeah, I would say I do. It's really refreshing to hear Rosie and Sarah describe how they work with influencers, because that is the best way. Personally, I don't like to work with brands that on a one-off occasion, because especially if you're not aligned on what the return on investment is, like a lot of brands will want sales, like they approach and they're just like, we want you to join our affiliate scheme. And I'm like, well, I can't do that because I've never tried your brand before, and I don't expect anyone to buy anything from me when this is the first time that they've heard me ever talk about it. So I think I did a collaboration a couple of months ago with a brand, and we sat down and we spoke about how this would look over a period of, I think it was about 6 weeks, and how I would introduce the brand, try it myself, and share my thoughts. So I definitely am for longer term relationships over one-offs, for sure.
And are you using, I guess, are brands requiring from you, or are you presenting your own measures of success, your own different metrics that you would point to how well the collaboration has gone? Is it coming from the brand, or is it coming from you?
I think it's mostly coming from the brand, but I am happy to feedback and say if I'm not comfortable with something. And I don't see myself as a salesperson, to be honest. I see myself as an influencer, and yes, sometimes that might result in sales, but at other times that is just awareness. And I think that one thing I've noticed is that sometimes influencers aren't rewarded for that awareness. But there are programs, for example, on the affiliate side of things where I've noticed that I've been getting paid for, I can't remember what the term is, but it's when someone clicks on your link and then they buy through another link. So that means that I have been a part of that sale, but I wasn't the end result of that sale. I think that's what a lot of brands fail to see, that influencers might not always play the biggest part in that sale, but they have been a part of the journey to someone being aware of that brand and choosing that brand.
Yeah, which I think is part of, it's part of the marketing mix. There's lots of different channels that you use in order to help drive sales as part of that. So, Ciara, same question to you on the metrics you're using. Is it coming from? Do you offer up certain metrics that you think are useful, or is it coming from the brands of what they require of you?
I think it's quite standard with all campaigns I do now that the staff are sent off afterwards. Some require them quite quickly, some prefer to wait a week or two. But like personally, I mean, especially in the space that I work in, when you're working within the food and food products, I definitely see it that it's more about brand awareness, because it's very different to say, you know, promoting clothing or a dress, and someone sees it, really likes it, and they'll, you know, go on the internet and buy it immediately. That doesn't happen with food, you know, because people, you know, they just don't go and buy a food product necessarily like that. They will wait till they go to the supermarket or they're doing their online shop. So it is more that I try to speak to brands about. It is more about brand awareness. And again, like everyone has kind of said, this is where the long-term relationship is much more fruitful, I think, because it's slowly building the brand awareness over time, rather than, like Elle saying, it's just being a one-off. You suddenly come on your Instagram stories, you're talking about a brand, and that's it, that you never mention it again. So I think it's really useful for brands, for PRs, and for influencers to really think about what actually is the product or service that you are promoting, because you know, your definition of success is going to be very different depending on what that is. And I definitely, I do feel sometimes like there is pressure to instantly produce these metrics of, you know, likes or comments, whatever it may be. Like personally, I say on Instagram, I will send likes and comments, but I always look at the share, or not the share, sorry, the saved metrics, because I think, especially for food and recipes, that is so important, because somebody has decided that they, you know, they're really interested in what you've posted about, and they're going to save that to maybe buy the product when they're next at the supermarket or make the recipe next week. And also with food as well, you know, if it is going to take a few weeks for you to see some feedback, quite often I will get the feedback a few weeks later from my audience. So I'll start getting tagged, say, in pictures of somebody making a recipe with the product, or I'll start getting questions in my inbox from people, and I will often feed that back to the brand at that stage, but not really get anything in reply. It's almost like, well, the campaign's finished now, you know, we're not really interested. So I think definitely within the, you know, just from speaking about my experience in the food space, I think it is important for people to realise it is very much a long-term project.
Yeah. So it's not something you can just dip a toe in the water. You've got to embrace it and give it time to yield results, particularly working with the same influencers over a period of time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect. Right. We've actually amazingly we've come to the end of the webinar time. So what I'm going to ask from each of you just before we go is for one piece of advice. So for our influencers, I'm going to ask for a piece of advice for brands, and to Rosie and Sarah, I'd like to ask for advice for influencers for best practice. Like, what advice would you give for best practice and working together for collaborations? Because we're about to leave lockdown, and obviously, you know, for many organisations, marketing budgets are about to increase again, and so now is the time to embrace influencer marketing. So, Ciara, I'm going to start with you. What advice would you give brands who are perhaps looking to do influencer marketing for the first time, or just want to improve their practice?
Yeah, I would say kind of, you know, search outside the box of influencers as well. Is that there is, you know, I think I've been doing it for a few years, and my account is quite general. Like, I talk about kids' food, I talk about family food, but there's some fantastic accounts, much, much smaller than mine, but with a more engaged audience, because they're really honing down on their niche. And I think rather than just, you know, approaching the big people or the big names, really take the time to search for those niche accounts, because that's where you're really going to hit like the nail on the head with, you know, with the right product, with the right fit, with the right influencer and the right audience.
Perfect, thank you. Elle, same question to you.
I definitely echo what Ciara said, and I would also add to honestly take the time to connect with that influencer and really understand what they're about, what their values are. I had a call with PR the other day, and you know, we sat down for 15, 20 minutes, and we discussed the brands that she worked with. We spoke about literally my whole history so she could really understand who I am, what I stand for, what kind of brands that I would be able to be an advocate for. And I'm pretty sure that the brands that we do work together on will have a greater return on investment because we sat down together and discussed how they could possibly work. And I think in that conversation, there also was no, you need to post 10 times about this brand, otherwise I can't send you this. She was just like, we're going to send you this product. You try it, you see what you think about it, come back to us and we'll have another discussion and see where we can go from there. So I think that was a really good way to work, something that doesn't feel pressurized and something that I could put into my content naturally because I have actually tried it before. I genuinely love it or like it or feel it's relevant for a part of my audience. So yeah, I think just not being afraid to dedicate the time to, once you found, like Ciara said, those smaller influencers like myself, to just dedicate some time to connect with them on a more personal level.
And I guess that makes you more open to working with them too. It improves the way that you want to work with them, and you want to perhaps go the extra mile to make the collaboration work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could count the amount of calls I've had with PRs on one hand, and it made such a difference with having that personal connection, and especially now while we've got more time to connect with people because we're not commuting and whatnot. Just use that time even to connect with influencers that you have already worked with and just find out how they're doing. I've had a couple of brands reach out to me and be like, hey, Elle, how are things? We know that life must be tougher as a fitness professional. And I'm like, you know what? I will never, ever, ever forget that brand that has done that for me in this time. So yeah, that's my bit of better.
Perfect. Really good, thank you. And so finally, Sarah and Rosie.
I think I was actually going to say on that one, I think you're completely right, by the way, about engagement. I think it's so important, and I don't think it should be about how many followers someone's got. I think you're completely right. Like some smaller bloggers that we work with, they've got some crazy engagement. I say as well, like advice kind of on the influencer side. I think I love it more than anything when I get an email from an influencer saying, can I try your brand? Like, or just, I'm always so up for like giving people samples to try the product. And I think, again, it's those people that kind of come and they personalize their email and they say, I love your brand, I'd really like to try it, or I've just come across your page, can we try it? And then from that, we start a relationship where from our point of view, I think we normally, like, if we know someone likes the brand and they've tried the product and we know that they already have an interest in the brand, then those are the people that we tend to work with probably more on paid campaigns because there is an interest already.
Excellent. Brilliant. That's wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar today, to our guest speakers, but also to our audience for taking the time to join us. Thank you all, and until the next one, we'll say goodbye. Thank you.